He knows magical things. I will let
Mhm.
him speak
He
computer.
knows he knows the keyboard shortcuts.
Oh, look at that.
In the
That's
future,
not
where
fair.
robots rule everything, like
And you can just size that.
knowing the proper keyboard shortcuts will be like knowing someone's true name.
Oh gosh.
You can control them, have them do anything you want as long as you know the proper shortcut.
It's the magical powers. Okay, this is almost working. Oh, so close.
Is close.
Your face is now there, but it's in a weird spot. Oh, okay. There we go. And then edit. Look at this fascinating show that we're doing.
We've got a show.
It's a show. We got this. There, good enough. Awesome. Ah, so anyhow, hello.
Hello.
Uh, we met once, I believe, at a
Yep, at PAX
PAX,
East.
at PAX
PAX
East a few
East.
years ago, but it has been forever since then, and we had like zero quality time. So this is, I'm kind of looking forward to this. We'll get
Mm.
to know each other a little bit. It should be fun.
Yeah, we were early members in the Devolver Digital crew way back then.
Yeah, yeah, that's why I had reached out to you, was because they were looking to publish Legend of Dungeon, and we were like, "Whoa, who are these people, and should we trust them?"
Yeah.
And they encouraged us to talk to everybody, and you were one of the everybody's, and you were really helpful too. You
Do
were
you
good.
feel your trust was well placed?
We never actually went with them.
Oh, really?
No, we didn't. But it would have been. I fully think that Devolver, as far as I can see, is wonderful, and they're very
Yes,
nice. So
I love those guys. They're awesome.
yeah, I agree. Let's see. So, yeah. Hold on. Sorry. Just I have nothing planned. I never do. The kind of the whole idea is for this is just we just kind of hang out. I would love for people to get a little bit of an idea of what you've been working on and what you've done in the past, so that they kind of know who it is that I'm talking to.
All right.
So like, prove you're a dev. What's your street cred kind of deal?
Oh, geez. I have worked on a lot of games that no one has ever played. That's like my curse. I've made a lot of games. I've worked on a lot of games, but like three people probably have played them because I've worked for pretty small studios. The first studio I worked for was called Farsight Studios. They made, I think their claim to fame currently is the Pinball Hall of Fame games. They're doing pretty well. That was my first job in the industry, and I didn't get to work on any of those games. I got to work on a lot of games that either were very small games or got canceled halfway through.
Oh yeah.
But that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
And then, let's see, my next job was at a company called Santa Cruz Games, which, if you can guess, was in a place called Santa Cruz. There, I worked on a movie or a game adaptation of the movie Igor. So I'm sure no one has seen that movie or played the game
Oh
that it's
no.
based on. It was actually a
Oh.
pretty decent CG movie with John Cusack as the main character, voicing the main character.
Oh
And
really?
it was about evil scientists and their Igors, and the villains had the perfect name. He was Dr. Schadenfreude, like, a great villain name.
That is a great
Uh,
villain name.
yeah. Um, and then that place went under. Even though it was kind of a budget movie tie-in, it was still really fun to work on because it was a very small crew. We had a lot of creative freedom. Um, so I got to work on large chunks of the game, which was pretty fun. So even though no one played it, I had a blast working on it.
That's a
Uh,
level of success in and of itself, I think. So.
right. And I still see the game and the movie every once in a while pop up in the bargain bins at like Target and Walmart.
Oh really?
I'll just kind of, rummage through a little bit and it'll pop up. And I'm like, wow, they must have just made a lot of these.
Oh no.
Um, let's see. And then after that, I worked at the largest studio I've worked at, Namco Bandai. I was a game designer in their iPhone division, where I continued to make games that no one played.
Oh my gosh.
But they were still really fun. I don't know. Maybe that just says something about me. Maybe I'm just, poison to various studios. But We got to do this company had a twin stick shooter, but they didn't really have much of a game to put around it. So my first job there was to help create this world, just theme for this twin stick shooter to go into. And Pride and Prejudice and Zombies was really popular there at the time. So we created our own kind of Victorian steampunk um, world, starring these characters called the Debutantes.
Debutantes. Love
Debutantes.
it.
Yes, they were women warriors hunting the undead and like lycanthropes and all that stuff in a very steampunk Cthulhu inspired world. Um, so that was really fun, just getting to make that world. Even though I didn't do much of the actual game development, but it was still fun, just creating this world and getting to write like short stories and stuff like that. Um, I worked on a couple other games there, and then I decided that I wanted a little bit more of a stable job because working in the game industry proper, basically, there's always the looming kind of shadow of getting laid off once your game ships or gets canceled or whatever.
Yeah.
Plus, you don't really get paid a whole lot compared to like software design and the rest of the industry. It's surprising. Like, I my day job is now as a user experience designer. It's a much more stable job. I don't have to work 80 hours a week. Um, and it's still really fun because just like game design, it's just about solving problems. You have all these systems and you're just trying to solve all the problems about, where those systems interconnect. And it gives me the chance to work on games in my spare time because I don't have to worry about like non-compete clauses and all that good stuff. So that's where I started working on Dungeon Hearts. Once I left Namco, I started working on Dungeon Hearts, which is, for anyone who hasn't played it, it's kind of like a cross between Puzzle Quest and Guitar Hero, or Candy Crush and Guitar Hero. Very fast-paced puzzle game. Vaguely match 3. Like you can say it's a match 3 game, but it's a lot different than that.
Yeah.
People tend to either really like it or really hate it. And I'm currently working on the sequel. I've made a couple other jam games between that, but now I'm working on the next Dungeon Hearts game. So I think that's me in a nutshell.
With the first Dungeon Hearts game, didn't you have a couple other people helping you? Are you
Yeah,
doing this next one all alone, or do you have a team for it as well, kind of?
well, with Dungeon Hearts, I was the lead artist, designer, and coder. I had an animator animate all the characters that I modeled because it was all in 3D. Um, I had a coder help me with some of the more technical coding aspects because I'm a terrible programmer. And he handled like the Steam integration and all that. Um, and probably the biggest place where I had help was like 5 different musicians. Like one of the main thing I'm proud of with Dungeon Hearts is that there are 5 completely separate and unique soundtracks, and they're each in a different musical style. So there's like a heavy metal soundtrack, there's a hip hop soundtrack, there's a more orchestral soundtrack, there's a chiptune one. Every time you beat the game, and it's a very short game, you can beat it in about an hour once you kind of become skilled enough.
Right,
Every
once you're good.
Yeah, it takes a while to get to that point, but when you're good, you can beat the game in about an hour, and every time you beat it, you unlock a new soundtrack in a different style, and then at any time you can just switch between the soundtracks, and they are all really, really good. I was surprised that I was able to get such talent and how little money I was paying them.
That's awesome. That was something that I'm trying to remember. You had a reason behind each of the different characters, if I remember correctly. Like one sort of is your son in a sense, and
Yeah, they're all basically people that I know. Like there are 4 characters. There is Brand. He's the red character. They're all color coded to the various puzzle pieces. He kind of represents me, and then there is Talina, the green archer. She's the African American female. That's my wife, same name, Talina. And then there's August, who is the blue character, and that's my son's name. And then there's Jin, who is a friend of mine. But I've had another kid since Dungeon Hearts came out, so I'm going to have to add a new character.
oh, yeah, it's required
Uh,
expansion.
yeah, well, there's like 13 characters in the next game, so I don't have a problem like slotting him in there.
There you go. There you go. Oh, so you have two kids now.
Yep, I got a 3.5-year-old and then a 9-month-old. We wanted to kind of get the child rearing early year stuff out of the way while we were still young and had the energy.
How's that working for you?
It's a lot of work. I don't get a lot of sleep, but I think I'm about like 4 or 5 months away from never ever having to like change another diaper until my kids have kids. And that's like the holy grail of being a parent is not having to change any more diapers or just have your hands in, you know, other people's bodily fluids.
Yeah. Yeah. No matter how much you love something, there's just no way that that's ever
Yeah.
pleasant. No.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely gotten used to it over time, like I'm assuming every parent does, but boy, do I look forward to never having to do it again. Except for when I want to, because by that point, my kids will have had kids. If they're still doing it that way by the time they're that old, who knows what's going to be going on?
Oh yeah, like just
20, 30 years, maybe they'll just be
full,
like factory made or
yeah,
something.
full-grown humans coming
Yeah.
out of like
You'll just take a
tubes.
little pill and then one will pop off and you'll have one next to you.
There you go. Perfect. I would do that. That sounds a lot easier than
Yeah,
the whole.
yeah. Yeah, but I mean, like the whole build up, the whole 9-month build up is, part of the process.
True.
It's given me ideas for games. Like I'm sure for most game designer, everything gives them ideas.
Well,
But you have this thing like within inches of you for 9 months that you can see moving around and growing and changing how it acts, but you don't ever get to like communicate directly with it. You can like communicate it with it like vaguely, like you play different kinds of music or different people will talk to it and it will respond differently. But you have this very kind of abstract level of communication with it, but it's always so close to you and you're so attached to it. That's I don't know what kind of game I would make out of that, but it's definitely struck me as something that could be interesting to tackle in a game.
yeah.
Abstract communication, but it's right there. You can see it, but you can't directly interact with it.
Interesting.
Kind of like there was this game, I think it was called The Way or just Way, where you are playing a two-player game, kind of like a platformer where you're two characters who are played by humans, but you can't directly interact. You can't talk to each other, but you can you can do things with your arms and body to try to communicate visually, and you have to navigate a platformer with the other person, trying to get out using nonverbal communication.
Interesting.
Oh,
Oh.
this one would be a little harder because the entity you're trying to communicate doesn't really understand anything you're trying to communicate to it. So you have to communicate at a much more base level.
Right, and it wouldn't really be able to communicate back so
Right.
much
Oh, yeah.
either.
Yeah.
Oh,
It
that would
wouldn't
be
be like a
interesting.
straight like one for one, but I think that kind of constraint of not being able to directly communicate with it um, and trying to understand what it wants could be interesting.
Yeah, that is
Just haven't
interesting.
sussed out what the details of that would be.
It seems like it would be actually a really decent design challenge. Like really trying to make something like that concept fun to interact with.
Yeah, constraints are great. I like having constraints.
That's one of the fun things about game jams,
Yeah,
you know?
yep,
It's like you get lots of constraints in a very nice little package.
yeah. I love game jams. I don't get to do nearly as many as I wish I could, but I've had fun with the couple that I have done. I've had a couple good games come out of them that I can't wait to have time to revisit.
Which jams do you usually are you doing like the Ludum Dare
The,
jams or
the only ones I've done within the last few years are the 7-day FPS game jams. Just
mm.
using Unity, it's really simple to get up and running.
Mm.
FPSs are really fun. You can get feedback very quickly. So I've made two of them, and the second one was VR focused, which
Oh,
was fun.
cool. Yeah, VR is definitely that's an interesting topic actually. Like do you have an Oculus Rift or any
Yeah,
headsets like that? Is that
I
oh
have one of the original. I was an original backer at like the tier that got you one of the original dev kits, the screen door dev kits.
yeah.
Uh, and I'm looking forward to getting one of the new ones in the mail soon for being a backer. But
Yeah.
yeah, I used one for the second 7-day FPS game jam. I made a game where it's called Valkyrie, and since it's just a week long, and I have a family and a job, it's very all the art is very abstract, but you kind of descend down. It kind of alternates between being kind of like on the ground in the midst of this battle where all of these, characters are battling and dying, and you can consume the souls of the characters that are dying on either side. You can just kind of like suck them in, and that powers your special abilities that you're trying to use to help your side win. So you go down in the battlefield and you basically collect the souls of the people as they're dying, and then you jump way high up into the sky and you're looking down kind of like at an RTS view, and that's where you actually use all your
Oh,
abilities
interesting.
to make your guy stronger or debuff the enemy or just rain down hellfire on the enemy. uh, and the visuals are very, very kind of, there's a lot of contrast. So when you're down on the ground, there's a lot of like the din of battle, and everything's very, very dark, and a lot of noise. But then when you jump up, it interpolates to kind of like some classical music playing. It's very white, very stark. There's not a lot going on.
Oh, interesting.
But everything's pretty much just like cubes and spheres, though. You have, cubes killing spheres and, brutal hand-to-hand combat. Uh, so I want to go back and actually, put some more high fidelity art in there because I enjoyed the contrast of going up and down, going down to gather all your resources, then jumping back up into the sky to use them.
Yeah, that's a really neat combination. That's never really even occurred to me to go for something like a first-person shooter to like a top-down RTS
Uh,
inside the same game. And using a Valkyrie type interaction, it really makes sense because the Valkyrie is like the Norse, like they would go to the battlefield and they would
right.
take
Yeah.
the wounded, dead soldiers to like Valhalla. They would bring them to their place of glory in heaven, basically.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so that's a really interesting like way of saying, oh, here, look, technically we're actually on a side and we're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna help our. I guess they'd be Vikings versus something that's not Vikings, so that would
Right.
work.
Or just like
Or
different warring Viking clans or something like that.
right,
Because
yeah.
right at the end, I put in an invisible Valkyrie that also works for the other side. So while you're doing your thing, the Valkyrie on the other side is trying to do their thing to help their side win. But you're invisible to each other, so you basically just have to infer what the other side is doing based on what's happening on the battlefield.
Right. Interesting. Oh, I like it. That sounds like a really cool concept. I definitely understand why you'd want to go back to that.
Yeah, I need to do something with it soon because the my first 7-day FPS game jam was for the very first version of it,
Hmm.
and I made a game where when you stop moving, everything in the game slows down. So like you're running along,
I know where you're going
and
with this.
yeah, and you're picking up equipment, you're being surrounded on all sides constantly, but you stop, everything slows down, the bullets coming at you slow down, and you can dodge around things and take out a whole bunch of enemies. And then of course Super Hot comes out.
Yeah.
Same thing. Uh,
Yeah, so
like
if you
I
don't
did
jump on
this,
this one.
yeah, I did
Yeah.
this a year prior. I mean, they're doing a great job with it. It looks beautiful. I think they're doing a better job than I would have if I had, not sat on my butt. But this was in the middle. This was in the middle when I was making Dungeon Hearts. I just needed a break for a little while. So I mean, at least the people who stole my idea. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Uh, at least the people who are making the same game I made are doing a really good job of it. I mean, it's not that original of an idea, so it's not like
It
I
is.
had I created that idea.
Well, it is. It's hard because it could have been an original idea. You can't
Yeah.
be sure. Yeah, it's just that
Yeah.
what is it? The 100 monkey theory? Like
Oh yeah, like I think it's like the infinite monkey
it.
theory,
Probably. Yeah.
or
Like there's just
enough monkeys, with typewriters and all that stuff.
right. Yeah. But I think maybe I'm thinking of the wrong thing. But there's some sort of concept of for every original idea you have, there's some monkey somewhere in 100 people. One of those other people is going to have the same idea as you.
Yeah,
Basically, the ideas are just kind of there, and people will
yeah,
end up grabbing them.
yeah,
And to some extent, I think in the industry, it's like as indie devs, we're all kind of trying to do something a little bit interesting and unique to both
Hmm.
satisfy our own curiosity as well as kind of, maybe get a little extra interest.
Yeah.
Make some money because, you need that delicious money to live on. But since we're all doing that and we're all kind of experiencing the exact same industry, like
Hmm.
sometimes there's just natural progressions that sort of happen.
Yeah, and I think Unity helped kind of pushes people in similar directions because uh, editing the time scale to slow everything down or speed anything up is just super simple. It's just like changing one variable. So I mean, when I came up with that idea, or when I decided that's what I want to do for my game jam, it was super simple because it's just, if your movement velocity is 0, just set the time scale to something different.
Right.
Then you can, uh, yeah. So I mean, it was easy to prototype that idea, which, you know, kind of points you toward that idea because it's easy to do, which in a 7-day time span,
Right. That's important.
I do whatever's simple.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think this next idea that you have is really good. Of course, right now you're not working on Dungeon Hearts. You are in the middle of another project at this point. You're working on the sequel. So,
Yes, it's a sequel. It's completely different gameplay. So if anyone watching this hated the first one, well, thank you for playing it at least. If you hated the first one, the next one will have all the cool art, but completely different gameplay.
what kind of gameplay are you talking about? Are you allowed to say? Like, or are you keeping it a secret kind of still?
I'm not in any position to where I can keep any secrets. I need the interest there. I don't have, that level of, million Twitter followers where I can care about keeping secrets. But it's a mishmash of board game and card game. Um, so it ends where the last game, or it begins where the last game ends. All the characters died, and they're in the underworld.
Oh, geez.
Spoilers,
Oh, no.
right? So it's kind of like a rogue light, which I hate to almost even mention those words these days. And that there's a blend of handcrafted and procedurally generated levels, and it's tile based, but it's very small levels, so it's almost like a puzzle. And the tiles are actual cards that are kind of face down. So if I want to move to the card in front of me, I have to flip it over, and there could be a treasure chest underneath it. There could be a monster. There could be a trap. There could be nothing. So you are uh, traveling from tile to tile, and flipping over cards is almost kind of like in a lot of roguelikes. You have to uncover. You have to they have line of sight.
Right.
So you can't see around corners. You can't see if you haven't been over there. And this is a very, very kind of simple version of that, to where you can't see what's on the other side until you go over there. But there are traps and things like that you uncover, which uncover all the tiles surrounding you, so that you can get surrounded by enemies if you're unlucky.
Oh.
Um,
Oh, no.
so that part is a little more traditional in the roguelike sense, but you create a party of up to 4 characters, and a character is literally just a deck of cards. Each character has 30 cards, and you choose a subset of 10 cards, and um, all those cards for each hero in your party get put into a deck, and that's your kind of pot of actions you have to take throughout this dungeon. And the cards for each character kind of fit a specific mold. So Brand's cards, he's very melee heavy, so all his cards are about dealing damage to enemies that are directly very close to him. But he has no ranged attack cards. He has no healing cards. So then there's a character who heals and buffs, and a lot of your traditional roles. But I have 13 different characters that you unlock, so there's a lot of different kind of variety to the types of builds you can put together. And then as you play, you unlock new cards for all the characters, and you can kind of build your own deck. And then as you descend into the dungeon, you are kind of drafting cards as you go. Like a little shopkeeper pops up. He's like, here's 3 cards from your sideboard. Choose one to add to your deck, so you can kind of customize your deck as you go down.
Interesting. That is completely different from your last game. That's great. I love it. I love that it's like in the same universe,
Right.
but you're really taking it in a direction you want to take your next game. You know, you're not being held to what your last game was.
Right. Yeah, the game Dungeon Hearts 1 was very kind of reaction speed centric. If you have really good twitch reflexes, you'll do a lot better. So I just wanted to try something that was very different from that and try something that was turn-based and or about building strategy. But at the same time, have kind of this board game feel to where all the numbers are very small. You can do all the math in your head. There's not kind of a lot going on in the background. Everything is presented to the player so that they can kind of plan out a few turns ahead. So like the AI for the enemy is all very simple. Like if you're surrounded by enemies, which kind of level design is based around, popping up enemies around you, that you can make a reasonable assumption. Oh, that enemy is going to move there, that enemy is going to move there, that enemy is going to use this attack on me, so that I know that if I use this card, and I skip my turn and do this and this, I can probably come out of it okay, but the player can plan a few turns ahead.
Cool. That's really cool. It sounds like an awesome game. Like just the design of it. It reminds me a tiny bit of Guild of Dungeoneering.
Yeah, I played I think that came out under a different name when it was like web only.
Possibly. I don't.
And I think I played that version. It was very, very much like Dungeons and Dragons.
Guild of Dungeoneering is kind of a little card based.
Yeah.
And they have like these tiles that you can have to place in order to move your character around the dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot more choice based than it's only a single character. So there's a lot of different stuff, but it's very interesting to see how natural it is for like an adventuring kind of rogue type game to mesh with card games. And I love that, like, even though it's sort of this tiny little part of me goes, oh, that has a couple similarities to this other game, but it also, I can see how it's going to play out completely differently.
Yeah,
I find that thrilling.
that's one of the nice things about like board games and card games. There's so many different ways that you can take it, and then once you start like linking them up, you have to make so many kind of small game design decisions about how board games and card games link up that the culmination of all those small decisions really kind of flavors the entire game, and it's really easy to end up with something that feels very different from other games of the same ilk while having similar qualities.
Yeah. Raslo is asking if you're having the same game publisher. Is this going to be published, or are you funding this all by yourself?
I don't know yet. I would have no problem, working with Devolver again because I had a very good experience with them. That said, it would be nice to, keep more of the money. Money's cool. Dungeon Hearts 1 was like $3, so it's a very, very cheap game. This game will probably be a little bit more expensive. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to be doing yet. I definitely want to do a Kickstarter at some point. Because I want to hire a lot of the musicians that I worked with back. I want to hire a 2D artist, so I can focus on the 3D stuff. I basically just want, since my main resource is time, since I'm doing most of everything, right. I would love to have some money to pay people to at least help me get it out there. But I don't have any plans on timing yet. I want to get the game, make sure the game is really fun, and get like the beginning to a very high level of polish, so I can give it to people and be like, give me some money, and this is, I'm not gonna make the game any bigger than it is now, so you don't have to worry about scope creep. But if you like what you have played in this chunk, I want to give you like 60 more levels of that.
That's actually a really good way to like say it, because there's none of that scope creep that a lot of publishers and people backing things are scared of.
Yeah, I've been thinking about what I would say in the Kickstarter video, and I'm of two minds, because I like being very blunt. I like, want to say, I am going to make this game the way it is now because, uh, I know how long it's going to take to make this game. I'm not going to get, a bunch of money and then add all these features to the game. It's like this game is going to get made whether this Kickstarter, exists or not, because my main resource is time. I just want the game, to be as high quality as it can be. So there's not going to be any stretch goals. There's not going to be any physical rewards because that's a huge time sink. I just want to make a game and make it as high, you know, as much polish as I can give it, and give that to people. But I don't know if that goes over well in a Kickstarter video.
Who knows? Who knows what works in a Kickstarter video anymore? Yeah.
I just want to be like, I want some money because I want to be able to pay people what they deserve. I don't want to see any of the money. I just want to be able to give my musician a ton of money, give my artist a bunch of money, give my animator a bunch of money, and have them, just make some cool stuff. But if not, then I can do all this stuff on my own. It just will not be nearly as cool, and it will take a lot longer.
Right, right. Yeah. Interesting question. Razlo, by the way, he's also a game developer. So he's got some interesting questions here. He wants to know if you could make a new entry in any established video game series, what would you pick? Like, what first comes to mind, at least?
Ooh, Well, I would like to say the Final Fantasy series because those are what got me into games. I would love to just kind of forget that, a lot of the Final Fantasy 13 and a lot of the later games have happened. Not that they're, I shouldn't say that because I really enjoyed some aspects of the Final Fantasy 13 series, and I did enjoy a lot of Final Fantasy 12. But I would like to take that level of visual fidelity that they have in their current games and kind of go back to just the very fun tone and not nearly so complex tone as the older games. I'm not, how do I say it? I just want that kind of fun that I had playing the older games without just the batshit crazy story of the current games. Yeah. Plus,
Yeah.
I would like to maybe pursue some darker themes than I think that they're willing to.
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, because they kind of remain in this kind of very family friendly sort of neutral area
Yeah,
of
exactly. And
strife.
I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to do that in my current game because I don't know how much I want to say yet. Although, who cares? The game is not coming out anytime soon. But I want to have a lot of just non-binary, actors in it.
Mm,
Different sexualities, different ethnicities. I don't want everyone in my game to be just like a straight white male. Um,
fair enough.
and so I want to explore that in the narrative of the game because in the narrative of the game, uh, everyone. If I'm not going off on a tangent and not answering his
Go
question,
for
then
tangents. We love them.
but in the underworld in this game, it basically kind of rips your memories and your personality out over time. Like being in the underworld gives you this amnesia, which just makes you forget who you are and turns you into this husk of this, basically a shell of a person. And the demons kind of take that husk version of you and are able to pour themselves into it and then go up into the overworld and carry out their plans. And that's how the player characters start out. And then because of story reasons, one of the demons gives memories back to one of the hero characters,
Oh,
and
interesting.
then he's running through the dungeon trying to reclaim all his friends' memories and a bunch of new characters along the way. So then, kind of like in a Persona 4 kind of way, you're following all the various characters as they get rescued. You're following their story as they reclaim their memories and figure out, why they ended up in the dungeon or in the underworld. A lot of the characters don't realize where they are or how they got
Oh,
there, and then
interesting.
over the course of the story, their memories return, and they find out, one character discovered that they were gay and their lover, did not accept them. So the amnesia of the internet, or the internet, sorry, the amnesia of the underworld,
Right.
was, calming to them. There's another character who basically being in the underworld is kind of like a drug. Uh, they they go into the underworld to forget things. Um, and then they come back out, and it's almost like a game. How far into the underworld can you get and still retain who you are, and then come back out again?
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
and then like one character wants to go into the underworld to find this powerful MacGuffin, who he was told that it would save his village. So he goes into the underworld to try to find it, and ends up getting lost and forgets who he is. And then another character you find out is the character who sent the first character into the underworld, and he sent him in. He sent him in there as a fool's errand to get rid of him because he was competition. But eventually, felt bad about it and is going to save him. So I want to, and that's a small slice of the stories because there's about 13 characters in there, and you follow them all. But I want to try to tell um, some deeper stories, or at least some more personal stories than, oh hey, let's save the world from being destroyed.
Right,
They're just trying to find out why they are there and try to resolve those how do I why am I here? What needs to be resolved to let me get out if I want to get out. I definitely want to have one character who's just you know what living up there sucks. I'm just going to stay down here where I can forget who I am.
interesting. Which actually, in some ways, sort of, I don't know, it kind of comments a little bit even on like suicide and stuff like that in a sense. Like this, I don't
Yeah,
want to really be alive because I
that's
think the world sucks,
that's
kind of.
exactly the point.
Yeah, yeah, it's very, very dark and
Yeah,
real and interesting.
one of the themes is just forgetting is just suicide is they're a suicide without having to actually do it. You're not
Right,
dead. You're just don't have to be who you are
right,
anymore.
right. A full escape kind of thing.
Right.
Could also be a commentary on drugs. Drugs or suicide. It works either way.
Yeah, I mean,
Interesting.
yeah, a lot of people end up in the underworld for reasons that they, can't quite control, or it's letting the underworld kind of have control for you, so that you
Hmm,
don't have to find resolutions for your own actions.
interesting. That sounds very intriguing.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that comes through in the actual writing.
That is tricky. It is always hard to convey your intention when you're trying to make a story. It's something I've never had to do for a game. I mean, I've
Mhm.
like written small short stories and stuff like that, but I've never had to convey them in a game kind of format, and I find it kind of intimidating. So I admire you
Oh,
for
I do
jumping into it.
too. One of the knocks that Dungeon Hearts 1 got is that it's very story light. There's barely any story in there. There is a
Mm,
story in there, but it's entirely environmental. And I definitely was too abstract and not on the nose enough. So for this, really wanted to go whole hog on telling an actual story.
awesome. That sounds really cool. Hmm. So
Although
you. Oh, go ahead.
one of the issues that I'm currently kind of trying to figure out how I want to tackle is how do you have characters in a fantasy world speak without sounding too pretentious? Do they talk, with these and thous, and do the very kind of stereotypical fantasy way of talking, or do you have them talking with like modern vernacular that's easier to read and relate to, but there's less verisimilitude. Uh,
Mm,
they readers might feel, I don't think this is how they talk or they would talk in this world.
right.
You want it to be believable, but still accessible.
Just.
And then the even harder part is there's a lot of demon characters. They rule the underworld, but they interact with the characters a lot. And it's how does something that's been alive, like for millennia, talk?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Do they talk differently when they are talking to mortals, who are like ants to them, versus when they're talking to other demons?
Hmm.
So I've been going back and forth a lot on that, but it's a fun challenge.
My first thought, which you could steal or you can completely ignore because it's potentially really stupid, is if the demons actually, like, if they're text boxes, like if that's how you're like if you're
Uh-huh.
not getting voice actors, if their dialogue is a completely symbolic language, it's all symbols, and they get subtitles, and then you don't even have to worry so much about the way that they're speaking, because it's when you read subtitles, it's kind of assumed that you're bringing that sort of modern
No, that would work.
language.
Uh, have you ever? No, I like the idea. Have you ever played The World Ends with You?
No, I have not.
Uh,
I could play like games for years and not catch up. So,
I really liked how they have their dialogue scenes set up with like actual like very big speech bubbles. So I'm totally ripping off their system, but that would make it easy to do what you're saying.
interesting. I'm gonna have to check it out. A world
I
first.
also took a lot of inspiration from an old comic book called Steampunk. Uh, just Steampunk by an artist named Chris Pavia. And a lot of the characters have completely different fonts when they speak and completely different kind of types of text boxes, especially the main villain. Um, when he talks, his speech bubbles and all his fonts are just extremely overwrought and ornate and just very crazy. But it really gives you a feeling for how he talks. And even if it doesn't give you a feeling for how he would really talk in real life, but it just does a great job of setting him apart from all the other characters. So I mean, I could do something that would work well with your idea.
Yeah, yeah. It would also be an interesting way to use kind of modern English to some extent and still give people kind of a fantasy feel, as if you gave it just a slightly elaborate text.
Mhm.
That kind of thing too you could work with. Oh,
Yeah.
so much interesting.
Maybe have some like very interesting sound effect, like I don't know, something crazy, some kind of like droning sound effect playing over top of it.
Yeah, there you go. Like you have no idea. They are definitely it's saying, "Oh, look, language is happening right now," but you have no
Uh,
idea what it is they're saying. That's
yeah, I
pretty
like that
cool.
idea.
Yeah. Us game devs, we can't stop thinking about problem. It's like problem solving. It's so much fun. I can't help but be like, how would I fix this
Yes,
problem?
I mean, to me, that's what most of game design and most of design in general is. Coming up with the skeletal framework of the systems is the easy part, but once you actually have those systems physically working together, they just kind of step on each other's feet all over the place, and you as a designer are like, okay, how am I going to find a solution to this system?
Yeah.
Am I going to create a little mini system that sits on top of this? Am I going to cut off one of these feet that's stepping on each other? Am I going to, find some way where they can be in the same space but are not, conflicting with each other? That's the majority of my job. I spent a long time prototyping this game. My current game probably should be done by now, but I've spent so long just prototyping it,
Oh,
and the
really?
game has been, like several different games along the path that I'm happy where it's at now, and it's not changing anymore. But I have done a lot of problem solving between, here and there.
How long have you been working on it? Like these prototypes?
Uh, this one is over a year, um, but I mean, I have the luxury of having a day job, so I'm not, depending on this game, to keep me going. So I mean, I have I'm fortunate that I can take as much time as I need to make the game that I want to make.
Yeah.
Um, but I was also going through kind of the typical game dev. I want to make this game really big. Now it's way too big. I need to make it really small. Now it's really small. I want to make it big again. And then just kind of just never-ending roller coaster.
Oh, yeah.
So I've put the cutoff. Like I'm not adding any more features to this. I'm only removing features. Uh,
Hmm.
and I'm getting to the point now where I'm enjoying removing features because whenever I remove something, it makes the things that are there stand out much more. So
Yeah.
I'm always on the lookout is like where can I combine features or where can I cut things off? Because I decided I would rather make more small games than fewer large games because I learn a lot once I actually finish a game.
Yeah, no, that's very true. We were having this massive discussion the other day between a whole bunch of different indie devs, just kind of about like the approach that somebody who's never made a game before should take when starting their first project. Somebody had like this incredibly massively ambitious idea, and they don't even know the first thing about making a game. And they're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to run a Kickstarter, and I'm going to hire all of the people I need to make this game. And we're like, are you sure that's where you want to go first? And you don't want to make a small game with a couple of people just to understand the process more, because even just understanding how to deal with that feature creep, and how every time you assume something's going to take a month, it takes 4, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
something I live by is done is better than perfect. So just finish. It doesn't have to be perfect. Your next project will, almost certainly be better than the one you're working on now because of what you learned. So, like, my 2 favorite sayings, that's one of them. My other favorite saying that keeps me going is, of course, I'm not going to forget it, then I'm on the spot, is that an expert is someone who has made every mistake in their field. So whenever I am getting a bad review for my game, or I'm just really frustrated, someone has said something negative, or just I'm not happy with how things are proceeding because I realize I've made a big mistake or just done something really dumb.
Wow.
It's like, I'm one step closer to becoming an expert game designer or an expert artist or whatever. You're just taking one step forward.
Yeah, because it's constant growth. That's something that people don't necessarily realize when they jump into it too, is where you're starting on, even just from the beginning of the project to the middle of the project, you're going to learn so much. Like you reach these different phases, and I don't know too much about programming, but I've definitely heard Calvin saying things when he looks at like some of the earlier code that he's written, like, what was I thinking? Kind of levels of stuff,
Yeah. My code is absolutely terrible because I only do it because I have to. But I feel like, I wonder how a real programmer would do this. And then I'm like, oh well, it works.
That's a good way of going about it.
Yeah.
I know you have like impending family coming back with crazy little children, so I don't want to spend the rest of our time talking about